Well, welcome to the podcast again today. I'm excited to have back with me one of my friends, Patrick Antonucci. He was here for the launch and he's back today. We're going to have a longer conversation. So welcome to the show, Patrick.
Hey man, thanks for having me on again. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. How's 2020 going for you?
Oh, it's fantastic. Haven't had a better year in my entire life. No, it's definitely been a roller coaster, but been trying to roll with the punches and have good discernment as I go through.
Yeah. All the plans and strategies we had going into this year kind of thrown out the window, but hey, there's some consistent themes and things that maybe, hopefully things are strengthened in a good way, like our prayer life and our time with
Yeah,
God
yeah.
and having more
Well,
time.
yeah. Two things that really stick out to me is the ingenuity of the human race in general that God created, and just how quickly people have begun to adapt, whether you agree with what's happening or not. Like, a lot of businesses have had to adapt and they're figuring it out. For example, this whole curbside pickup, a lot of places didn't offer that before, and now everywhere has curbside pickup. And I just like to see how the businesses are adapting, and churches too.
Yeah.
Like, our church started doing online services back in March. We never did that before. We've recorded sermons and put them online, but we never did online services before. And a lot of churches are doing that now. And it's really opening the doors for a lot of people to hear the message of Christ. People that like don't go to church, but would watch it online, at least opening the door for the gospel. And I think it's just amazing
Yeah. Same with our
in that
church.
respect. Yeah.
Well, tell us real quick, for those that don't know you, about yourself and your family and what you do.
Sure. Well, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I always like to start off with that. My parents divorced when I was 5. I primarily lived with my mom, went with my dad on the weekends, almost every weekend. Had a fairly good relationship with both of them, but definitely came from a broken home. My dad was not a spiritual influence in any way, shape, or form, very worldly. And my mom always had a spiritual side to her, but that didn't really come more to fruition in my life until I was about 12 or 13, when we started attending church more. And that's when I became a Christian and was immersed into Christ when I was about 13 years old. And at that time, I fell away for a while. I started hanging out with a lot of kids at school that were not Christians, and got into some unchristian like activities,
Yeah.
if you will, till I was about 19. And that's when, I like to say, God hit me upside the head and kind of knocked me back into my senses. And from the time that I've been about 19 years old, I've been more intentionally walking the straight and narrow path, of course, with the Holy Spirit's help. And I don't do it perfectly, obviously. Nobody can.
Right.
My wife and I have been married for 16 years, and we met in church. Her dad was the associate preacher at our church that I had gone to, it's the only church I'd really gone to. And he was only there for a couple years. It was like God had him there long enough for Jessica and I to meet. And we met, hit it off really well, engaged 9 months later, married 4 months after that. And now 16 years later, God's really blessed us, and we have 5 kids. At the time of this recording, my youngest is 5. My oldest is 13 and a half. And we've homeschooled them since day one. And it's a lot of work for my wife. I help out where I can, but it's definitely worth it. And so the thing I run into is that I'm trying to become something I've never seen. Like I said, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I don't know what a functioning marriage looks like from personal experience. I don't know what a godly father and husband looks like from personal experience, because I didn't have that growing up. So I'm trying to become something I've never seen. And so I started reading books, reading blogs, podcasts, YouTube videos, attending conferences, workshops, just trying to soak up as much as I could to become more of who God has called and created me to be. And then about 2.5 years ago, I got the idea to start Dad Hackers. And I pretty much started that with a Facebook group, just invited some Christian dad friends of mine because I really wanted to surround myself with other men who had the same intentions. You're a Christian, you're a father, and you want to become better. And so I started that. And then June of 2018 is when I launched the Dad Hackers podcast. And on there, we primarily interview Christian men who either have an expertise in an area that's relevant to Christian men, or older men who have begun to put into effect a multi-generational legacy of faithfulness. Like their kids are Christians, their grandchildren are becoming Christians. And I just want to pick their brains and really, see what kind of things did you do? And how was your family life set up and those kind of things. And then I do some solo episodes on there as well, just topics that come up. And, it's been really good. And we also have a membership group called the Iron Man Mastermind. And that's really good. So by day, I'm a high school math teacher for an online school here in Pennsylvania. And so by night I do Dad Hackers.
That is your superpower.
Yes, definitely.
That's cool. I love that story because, some ministries start because a person has knowledge and they're going to share it with people. And yours started because you were seeking and you had discernment to know that, hey, I don't have it all together. I need to surround myself with guys that have more knowledge than me from different walks of life, from different age ranges, and interview them and learn yourself. And while you're learning, you're sharing that journey with other people. And that's a great example, I think, for anybody, dads or not, that, first step is to realize your weaknesses, where you need help in, and then seek out that knowledge, because there's so much knowledge out there. Sometimes it's overwhelming, but know exactly where you're struggling with, and then find people that can speak into that and find ways to grow in those specific areas. Not all of us need to grow in how to control anger, for example, but if that's something you're struggling with, maybe there's a brother in the Lord that has overcome that. Maybe they've can share their journey that, hey, I struggled with this for 10 years. You don't need to go through everything that I went through, because I want to walk through it with you. And so that's a great example of discernment and knowing where we need to be built up in, as iron sharpens another. Yeah.
And I've heard, it's good to learn from your experiences, but it's even better to learn from other people's experiences. Particularly their mistakes and failures and setbacks, so that hopefully you don't have to make those same ones. You can make bigger ones and learn more. Cool.
Well, I want to get to know the dad behind the hacker.
Ooh.
So got some icebreaker questions for you here. So what would you say your favorite movie of all time is?
Yeah, we were just talking about this before we hit the record button. And I was discussing this question with my wife, because I'm like, I hate these kind of questions. What's your favorite this or your favorite that? Like, I normally don't have a favorite. I have different things that I like. And years ago, my wife and I and some friends, before we had kids, we watched Zoolander with Ben Stiller in it. And I was like, that's a movie I really like. It's funny. There are some very inappropriate things in there. And she was like, maybe that's not the best thing to share on a Christian-based podcast. I was like, yeah, maybe not. So I just confessed that. But you and I were talking about the series called The Chosen, which there's about eight episodes out right now, and it chronicles the early days of Jesus's ministry. And I think eventually they want to make more episodes and go through his whole life, and it is phenomenal. I mean, it's on par with some of the best production I've ever seen come out of the Christian sphere, as well as, if you remember when The Passion of the Christ came out and how like impactful that was, this is on that level or even higher. I mean, it's just phenomenal, and I love it. I cry every episode. I'm in tears. I mean, my eyes are sweating. And
I know I want to watch it again, because it was very impactful. It took me like 2 episodes to get into it, to kind of realize what they were going for. And once I was in, I was like hooked. And how they brought, real world scenarios to the time frame and what the disciples were, a lot of it's conjecture, but they had real lives. They had real hopes and dreams, and they had fears of the Roman oppression, and they were believing in a Messiah that would come and save them. And, you know, how Jesus came as a humble servant and how he chose them was just so
Mm-hmm.
impactful to see. And I would encourage everyone to check that out if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, and two things. They do fill in on a lot of background information, and they create backstories for a lot of the characters. Of course, this stuff isn't in the Bible. It's just a lot of, like you said, a lot of speculation. And I also recommend watching it a second time with the subtitles on,
Mm,
because sometimes it's hard to understand exactly what they're saying, or they're pronouncing something in Hebrew or something like that, and you pick up a lot more the second time through, especially with the subtitles on.
exactly. All right. Well, you love these favorite questions, so let's keep it going. So
Yeah, keep fire away.
if you could be a fruit, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that to you. I really hate those questions because those are like, are you serious? I don't know what
What's
fruit
your
or
spirit animal?
I'm going to be. Yeah. Okay. So how about a favorite author?
I really like John Maxwell. He's got some really good content on leadership. And there is a guy called Jack Cottrell is his name, and he writes a lot of books on theology. He has a book called The Faith Once for All, and it's a super thick book on systematic theology. I've got it somewhere behind me on my bookshelf. But I mean, this guy's like super deep, super insightful, and really, really picks apart the scriptures in a good way and can really mine some of the deep truths and pull it together. So, yeah.
That's awesome. What about some hobbies, things you like to do in your quote free time?
Free time. What is that?
Yeah, right.
No,
With 5 kids.
I actually enjoy running. I ran this morning. I've been doing some on a treadmill. We have a local bike trail right in walking distance from my house now. They just opened it up last August, and I just love putting some like electronic music on my headphones and go do 3 miles. And it feels really good to get the exercise and the movement, and just clear my head out. And it's I enjoy that. I also like reading, which is weird because I hated reading growing up, but I read for like knowledge and information now. I just finished reading the book called The 12-Week Year, and it's all about goal setting and getting results and being consistent. And it was really good, really, really good book.
Awesome. All right. Well, I want to jump into talking about marriage here. So this is not just for dads, but there will be dads listening, and also wives and all the whole spectrum. So thinking back to, and you've been married for, what is it, 15 years now?
16.
16.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought you were pretty close to me. I'm coming on 15. So having discernment in our marriage, we make key decisions almost every day, it seems like, but there's some bigger decisions than others. There's routines that we've maybe grown in or not implemented maybe soon enough. So thinking back to your time as a husband in your marriage, what are some key decisions you made, either good or bad, that helped grow and strengthen your marriage?
A couple things, good and bad, I'll mention. One is having a weekly date night. Our night is Thursday, and almost never do we actually go out of the house, but we put the kids down and then we'll watch some Netflix, watch some YouTube or something, like just like chill out together. And we really try to make it a point to not schedule anything Thursday night. Once in a while it happens, and that happens, but we really try to protect that night in that evening. And particularly for parents who are right in the trenches of raising children, when you have young children at home and you can't really leave them home alone for a long period of time. Even our kids will like go out for maybe an hour and leave them home, because our daughter's trained in babysitting and our son's 13 and a half. And so they can handle things pretty good.
Nice.
But it's okay to not go out on a date to a restaurant every week. You hear people talk about have a weekly date night, but get creative. Your dates can be on your back porch, in your backyard, around your campfire ring, and those kind of things. But having that consistent time. And it's also a time where we're not really planning or strategizing. Sometimes we just talk, and that's fine. And that's another thing, is have a time where you can plan and strategize at least once a week, And we've been doing that. We'll plan out our meals. We'll coordinate our schedules. What do you have going on? What do I have going on? What do the kids have going on? And I'll tell you, um, in my journey with podcasting, nothing made my wife happier than finding out 15 minutes before I had a podcast interview that I had a podcast interview. And I say that sarcastically because
Yeah.
That didn't make her enjoy my podcasting at all.
Right.
So when we have this weekly meeting, we get it all out on the table about what's going on, and that's really helped in our communication. Another area, and this might be getting into another question that you might ask, is with understanding my wife's intuition. And what I mean by that is she has an intuition and a sense in her that I don't have. She has a perspective and a lens and a filter that she looks through life at that I don't have. And it's very valuable. And it's taken me a long time to realize that, because the way she looks at things is different, is actually very valuable. In a bad way that this happened was I taught high school math at a brick and mortar school here in Pennsylvania for 7 years. And I really, really wanted to get out. And I contrived this plan to get out and carried it out. And she wasn't really 100% on board with the plan. And I took a tremendous pay cut, didn't have benefits, didn't have our retirement, but it was just a really bad situation that I wanted to get out of immediately. And there was a lot of selfishness on my part. And that kind of set us back for a couple of years. I've since then got back into teaching. I teach for an online school now, like I said at the beginning, and I like it. I mean, it's pretty cool how it all works out.
Yeah.
But had I listened more to her intuition and her perspective and her point of view, it may have saved us a couple of years of hard times.
Right.
And even more recently, my father is old. He's elderly. He had me later in life, and he had 4 other children that are old enough to be my parents. And right now he's in a season where he's almost at the point where he can't live by himself. And it's a difficult situation in the family right now between myself and my siblings. And understanding that my wife has good perspective and good insight, I know to go to her and say, babe, what do you think about this?
Yeah.
Because she's removed from the
Right.
deep emotional side of that situation. And she's really helping me work through that.
That makes a lot of sense.
Did I answer your question?
Absolutely. Yeah. No.
That was long-winded. Sorry.
And going back to date night, that's a good reminder, because I have a mentor who did our premarital counseling, and every time I see him, his name is Pastor Sean, and every time I see him, he's like, "You guys having your date night?" And usually it's like, oh, okay, not really, but he's always a reminder, we need to have it, and I have found when we do have it on our schedule, it has helped us grow. And I think it's great wisdom that you don't have to go out, because it's this big ordeal, where are we going to eat, how are we going to get a babysitter, what's our time frame, it doesn't have to be that every time. It can just be a committed time between the two of you to engage in conversation, to unwind, to do whatever.
Right.
And I think that's a great reminder for me, and I hopefully all the couples listening, is that it doesn't have to be a big production. So that's great.
Yeah. And just to say a couple more things on that, not every marriage has the same familial support. So for example, some husbands and wives have excellent relationships with their parents and their in-laws. And at any moment they can call them and they'll come over and watch the kids, and it's very easy. But not everybody has that situation. Some marriages, there's dysfunction in the family. The relationship piece isn't there with the parents. They don't have a babysitter, at their beck and call, or maybe they live out of town and, they're not close to family who can just come over and watch the kids. And, you're not really comfortable just leaving your kids with anybody or leaving them by yourself. So, I understand the importance of having a date night and getting out. And I do recommend doing that when you can. But don't feel bad if that's impossible and you just have to get creative and have an in-home date.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I want to move on to parenting, having discernment as parents. I feel from my experience and what I've seen is that most parents just do kind of the best they know how, either from the experiences that were modeled to them or just what comes naturally. And a lot of times parents feel like they're failing. Honestly, most of us feel like we're doing something wrong, where we're not doing something right. And so what would you say to parents who maybe feel that way or that want to grow in knowledge and confidence in what they're doing and to help them know that you're doing the right thing or you need to seek another avenue to help you?
Yeah, I think the most revolutionary thing I've ever encountered with respect to parenting is getting connected with the National Center for Biblical Parenting. It's run by Dr. Scott Turansky and Joanne Miller. I've had Scott on my podcast. I went through his parent coaching program with him and being coached by him. And then I went through the coaching program that he has to become a parent coach myself. And two of the books that he's written, a number of books with he and Joanne Miller. The first one is Motivate Your Child, and the other one is called Parenting is Heart Work.
Oh yeah, I've read
They
that
are
one.
they are phenomenal, phenomenal books.
Yeah.
A lot of parenting books that I've read um, often talk on the theoretical level, or um, they come at it from more of a behavioral standpoint. And just like the one book's title is Parenting is Heart Work, these books, they're all their books, really approach parenting as teaching and training the heart and the mind of your child from a Christian perspective. And there's very, very detailed practical applications, examples, what to do step by step. I mean, it's been revolutionary because I didn't grow up with that. So I don't have that in me. And I know a lot of people don't. I know a lot of people don't. You know, in Ephesians chapter 6, it talks about uh, train up your children in the discipline and instruction of the Lord. There's that command for us as fathers. But then, like, the how to, I think they really, really cover it. And I mean, I can't speak more highly of these two books, and they have a lot of other books as well, but if you're going to start with one, I'd start with the Motivate Your Child book. And I'm currently rereading that as well, and every time I read it, it's just whoa.
Yeah.
I
That,
mean it. Yeah.
those are good resources. And I think that it can be overwhelming when you look at like the parenting section of the bookstore or something. It's like, there's just too much. And we tend to, I think some people just like, there's too much knowledge or I don't know where to start. I'm just going to
Yeah.
figure it out. And I would caution against that because, learn from those that have gone before us, like we talked earlier, and get those resources and apply them. Don't just read for head knowledge, but actually apply them. Just like we don't read the Bible for head knowledge, we apply the Bible.
Yeah.
And but at the same point, even having the knowledge of how to parent, we have to realize too, there'll be days when we are going to fail. There'll be days when we don't do it right. There'll be days when we feel like things are crashing around us or our children are not uh, falling into the mold we thought they were going to fall into according to
Right.
whatever we had for so I would just say that it's, first of all, bring yourself to a point of where you can repent if you do fail as a parent and your children know it. Maybe there's been one instance, or maybe it's been a long time span when you have failed. Let your children know. They love it when you come to them. And most of the time, like if I apologize to my son, he's like, okay, kind of like, sure. But you still model that to them and say, I did this thing wrong. Would you forgive me? And I think that goes a long way, not just for the moment, but to be an example to them on how they can ask for forgiveness too when they mess up.
Yeah. And they cover that aspect in the book. Um, let me back up a step in talking about this, because this is a subject very near and dear to my heart. I think a lot of parents, well, one, I think we always revert back to how we were raised.
Yeah.
That's like our default. We go back to that. And a lots of times that was dysfunctional or wrong. And, but that's all we know.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yeah. But you have to be very, very intentional and kind of shift your perspective on parenting. Parenting isn't just telling your kids when they're wrong and doling out consequences. There is a big piece of parenting that a lot of parents miss, and that is the teaching and the training and the coaching and the repetition of all that and the time it takes and the energy and the frustration that you go through, um, that we miss. So for example, if when your kids come into the house and they just throw their stuff everywhere, that frustrates you. And lots of times you'll be like, okay, go ahead, go get your shoes, hang up your jacket, put your book bag away, all that stuff. But like every single time you're telling them to do that and nothing changes. Well, have you ever had a training session where you train them how to actually come in the house appropriately, or sit at the dinner table, or how to greet a new person rather than just like have your hands in your pockets and hide behind mommy's leg
Yeah.
and stare at the floor? um, you know and they're not going to get it the first time you teach them. It
Right.
takes lots and lots of repetition. um, I heard a line recently, and it's like, if you want different things, if you want different results, you have to do different things and do things differently. And that very much applies to parenting. If you want different results with your children, you have to do different things and do things differently. Um, and teaching and training your children in the discipline and of the instruction of the Lord not only requires a change for them, but it requires a change for you as the parent as well.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very significant aspect to that.
That's good. So you talk in your ministry too about one of your goals is having multi-generational faithfulness
Mm-hmm.
as a goal for the dads. And, thinking about multi-generations, let alone one generation, it consists of discernment with hundreds, if not thousands of decisions, right? So how does someone stay consistent while keeping a vision they have for their family at the forefront, but knowing that the journey is going to be rough and, you might sway to the left or right, but how do you stay on that path?
Yeah, there's a lot in that. I think having that big compelling vision helps you stay on the path and motivate you whenever you don't feel like doing it. Understanding that the tiny little decisions you make every day add up over the long run to a huge result. So, for example, it's not the trip to Disneyland, this massive trip that costs you thousands of dollars, that this once in a lifetime experience. That's not what's going to make or break your family. It's the day in, day out routines and intentional things that you do with your family. And I think we need to understand that you can't ignore your family for months and then take them on a big trip and then expect that to be able to make up for it.
Right.
I heard another quote, and I'm not going to say it for verbatim, but it was basically like this false dichotomy between quality time and quantity time.
Yeah.
And there so the thing you run into is that what you think is going to be quality time may not be quality time. It probably isn't quality time for your kids. And what you didn't think was quality time for your kids might be quality time. The only way you're going to hit that target consistently is if you spend quantities of time engaged with your children. So like when you're home, not just being physically present, but being like mentally present as
Right.
well. So like you could be home for multiple hours, but be on your phone all
Yeah.
those hours, or out in the garage tinkering with this or that, or woodworking, or working on the car. And it's okay to have hobbies, but I'm just throwing out some examples. Um, but the biggest thing is being consistent and persistent and intentional and purposeful in the things that you do, having routines that you do with your children, um, having traditions that you do with your family, just like the date night with your wife. You have to intentionally invest in your children, not just time hanging out with them, but invest in them. I think a big misnomer is that, just like we send our kids to school to learn academics, we send our kids to church to learn about God and Jesus Christ. If your kids' experience with God is that 30 minutes of that object lesson in the church youth group or in the church, kid ministry, whatever it is, um, that's not enough.
Yeah,
That's not enough. And in fact, it's not the church's primary job and role
exactly.
to raise your kid spiritually. That's your job as a father, and by extension as a mother as well.
Right. And like you said, being intentional with the time, like you might only have 30 minutes with your child, but that can be more impactful than 3 hours of just randomly watching a TV show with them. If you're
Mm-hmm.
intentional about doing something that's important to them, talking with them, whatever it is that your child needs in that 30 minutes, that can be impactful because, like you said, it's intentional. And so we don't have to
Right.
just throw hours and hours into our kids if it's not impacting them in the right way. And, on the opposite side of that, we can't just make it up with a vacation or, bringing a present home to them because you feel guilty about not
Feel
spending
guilty.
time with
Yeah.
them. That doesn't,
Right.
that might mask it in a moment, but that doesn't make up for it in the long run.
Yeah, and there's going to be different seasons in your life where maybe you have to work extra hours or take a second job or
Right.
go back to school or whatever other circumstances. There are going to be seasons in your life, and that's okay. But in each of those different seasons where your time availability fluctuates, make sure you are intentional and purposeful about fully engaging with your children, and not just being there, but depositing eternal investments in their souls and in their hearts and in their minds, um, because you'll never get this time back. Never.
Exactly.
You can't.
Yeah.
It's brutal
Yeah.
because it just keeps ticking by.
Yeah. And when you realize it's going away, sometimes it's too late. If it's down the road, you're like, I can't get it back. That's a lesson I think we learn later in life, but the earlier we learn it, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Patrick, I have one more question for you today. So the Bible says, do nothing out of selfish ambition, Philippians 2:3. As parents and as spouses, we often want to satisfy ourselves, but a lot of times that's at the expense of those around us. So how would you say we balance about getting what we quote want versus doing what is for the good of the family or our relationship?
First thing that comes to mind with that is establishing good routines in your life. So this summer, what I've done is I've gotten up at 6 o'clock every morning, with a few exceptions, and that's when I do my Bible reading and prayer and journaling, and that's really what fills my cup at those times. And I also do some running and working out, and that helps me. You know what I'm saying? Um, and then I do my stuff with the dad hackers. But I think having those good routines helps me, and getting up before just about everybody else is up. That really helps me get the time, some me time, if you
Right.
will, if you want to call it that. Um, and then I'm available for my kids. And also back to this idea of seasons, realize that you're in a season right now where you're called to make significant sacrifices with time and energy and resources and money for your children. Um, because your first ministry as a husband and as a father is your wife and is your children.
Yep.
Even if you're a full-time pastor or preacher or minister or missionary, if you've got a wife, if you have kids, your first and primary ministry is still your wife and your kids. And I think sometimes we forget that. And it's okay to have hobbies and different things like that. But if they're getting in the way of you being fully engaged with your wife and your kid and really investing in them in the way that you're called to, then those need to be put aside. I'm not saying you have to put everything aside
Yeah.
and not do anything and never go golfing or never go play softball or never go camping or anything like that. And as the kids get older, you can start involving them
Yeah.
in those things. And yeah.
Well, that's a great way to end it. Those first ministry is your family. That's a good reminder for us all.
Yeah.
Cool, Patrick. Well, let everyone know where they can find you and anything you're working on that you want to plug.
Yeah. I mean, you could find everything at dadhackers.us. That's our website. We have a free private Facebook group just for Christian dads. You can join that, request to join that. We have a podcast. We've been going for a little over 2 years, about over 120 episodes out now. So there's quite a catalog there that you could listen to.
Yeah.
Keep you going for a couple days. And we also have an Ironman mastermind membership group that I put together, and there's information about that on the website as well.
And that is, if men want to join that, what are they getting out of it?
So, long story short, I found that a lot of guys live life isolated, and a lot of their struggles and things that they're dealing with, they feel like they are dealing with these things alone and that they're the only one. And I think this is a scheme of the devil and negative, self-talk, that negative story that we tell ourselves. But what I found is that in reality, most men struggle with the same types of things. And we've just been deceived that I'm the only one that struggles with pornography, or I'm the only one that struggles with fear, or I'm the only one that struggles with self-doubt, or I'm the only one that, but when you get guys that are committed to one another, banding together, you have a trusted board of advisors, you can do great things. And that's why we call it Iron Man, from Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And that is never more true. And we do it all virtually. So, I mean, we've guys all over the country, and it works.
That's great. In a digital age, there's no reason not to have an accountability group. So all the guys listening, if you're yearning for that, if that's something that fills a void in your life, check it out. I'll put it in the show notes. Well, thanks, Patrick, for coming on. It was great talking with you as always, and God bless you.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it, brother.